Hey, thanks for joining us here on the Coach for Life podcast. Here on the show, we talk with coaches who have not only had great success on the scoreboard, but have also had long-term success helping their players win in life. Coach, you have an incredible opportunity to make a lifelong difference in the life of your players. Don't miss it. I couldn't be more excited for you to hear this interview with Coach Matt Kennedy. Coach has won over 300 games, including 14 consecutive area championships, and secured his first state championship in his final year of coaching. During his 30-plus year coaching career, Coach K figured out how to build a baseball program that went beyond the scoreboard. At the end, he also shares an emotional story about his dad, who cheered him on every single game right up until the end. You got to hear this. Including a 2A state championship.
Some days were very, very, rewarding. Some days were very difficult. They want that advice, but then they've been chewed out at practice.
Well, I think sometimes coaches struggle with, do I take my son to practice?
You can impact people. You can impact them one or two ways, positive or negative.
A lot more than just X's and O's.
You start seeing that the father's less and less and less involved.
All right, our guest today on the podcast is former head baseball coach at Westbrook Christian School, officially known as Coach K, but Matt Kennedy. He had an outstanding career, 25 years plus as a baseball coach, including a 2A state championship, and also being awarded the 2A Coach of the Year that year. Coach, great to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Coach. I really appreciate being here and the opportunity to share. And
looking forward to seeing how it goes. So tell us about your family.
Well, so I've been married for 31 years to Nanette, and I have two boys, Tanner and Garrett, who are 26, fixing to be 27 and 24.
So, Coach, how was it both of your guys played for you?
Well, honestly, it was some days were very, very, rewarding. Some days were very difficult when you got to go home and you've got to be dad after you leave the ball field, and those of us who've coached their kids understand you have to separate that.
Right.
But for a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, that's tough sometimes because, they're looking at you as dad and you got to be coach. And so it makes a big difference whenever you're trying to coach them up and treat them fair. And I think sometimes we have the mentality as a dad coach to coach them harder because of who they are,
right.
Because you don't want to show favoritism and you don't want to think that, oh, he's getting by with it because he's a coach's son. And so sometimes we're just a little bit tougher on those guys. And then you get home and then you got to be dad. You got to
right.
find out what's going on at school or, what girlfriend, or girl you're talking to. And, they want that advice, but then they've been chewed out at practice. And,
right.
With my oldest son, it was a learning curve. And so when Tanner came through, he was kind of the guinea pig to all that, and as Garrett got a little bit older, he didn't have like what his brother did because I'd already tried it out on his brother,
right.
Plus they're different personalities. And so, with the oldest one, he was kind of laid back, and the other one, he would give it right back to you. So, you just had to learn to balance it. And, the conversation I'd have with him, and I was intentional about this because I'd learned it from a couple of other coaches that are friends of mine, was, don't take it home with you. Don't take what happened at practice or in a ball game home with you because you do want to have that relationship. You want to stand next to them when they get married, or you want to be there, for the life things that happen. And if you let what happens at practice or on a field dictate how you treat them at home, then you're really going to fail, I think.
Let me ask you this as far as having your boys around practice when they were even younger.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think that was a good thing?
Well, it was.
I think sometimes coaches struggle with, do I take my son to practice and all that? And what are some good things that can come from that?
The one thing I learned early on was, I was very fortunate to work with two really good coaches in our county. But the one thing I learned was the family aspect of it. And, both of my boys, when we started, especially when I became a head coach, they were just at the ball field. And a lot of people don't know this. Some do, but I coached girls junior high basketball, and I had Tanner at the court with me, and then I can remember all the girls holding him when he was an infant, and that was years ago.
Sure.
And so, but we just included them in everything we did because, if you can build that atmosphere of the team being a family, you can include your family. If you don't, then you're excluding your family, and that makes it really difficult. Like I said, not only to be able to be a good coach, but a good mentor for what you want to accept, but also for your children because you're not spending any time with them.
So why coach? What drew you to the profession? And I'm going to add another question to that. When did you know, I think like we've talked about coaching being a calling. When did you know that, man, this is what I got to do?
The biggest thing was I wanted to play everything. And my mother wanted me well-rounded. She was she loved music. She taught piano. And it's kind of weird. I tell people this all the time, especially students that I deal with now, is my mother wanted me involved in music. She wanted me involved in art. She wanted me doing sports. She wanted me to be well-rounded. And up until my freshman year, I played football, basketball, baseball, trombone in the band. And so people look at you like, you did all that? I'm like, yeah, man, I played in the band because it was just – and I enjoyed it. It was something different than just the sports all the time. And then my middle school principal, who also you're familiar with, his name's Skip Bundy, who has since passed. And, he was a Major League Scout, but I didn't find that out until about the third time I got to go to his office and get a paddling, So about the third time I was like, hey, those baseball guys on your office wall? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, what? I didn't even know that because he never told anybody.
Right.
And he said, yeah, I'm a Major League Scout for the Kansas City Royals. I was like, what? So then I wanted to go to the office more often. So I got in trouble more so I could go talk to him about baseball. So, but it was cool because we developed, even now that I look back, I see the relationship we developed through me having to get disciplined. And it wasn't like anything major, but I see the relationship we developed and we stayed in contact even after I graduated from high school. When I went into college and even into my coaching career, we stayed in contact. But I can remember him taking me on a Saturday morning. He'd call me up, or old phones. It wasn't text. He'd call my mom up and say, hey, can I take him? I was 15, 14 maybe. He said, can I take him on this scouting trip I need to go on? And we would go scout, guys. And so I think that's where my love for baseball even became more passionate, I was going, going all the time. And so, that's where it kind of started. And then, naturally you go from your middle school years where you think you're going to be, a professional ball player into high school, and you try to, hone in on your skills and do the very best you can and, work at it. And I was fortunate. My mom and my dad put me in places where I could have very good instruction. And so I continued to play. I narrowed it down by the time I was a junior, senior to one sport, and that was baseball. And so never did I have an intention to be a coach. I always thought, at 5'9", 155 pounds, I was going to be a professional baseball player, which I think we all have to have dreams and aspire to do stuff. But, and then I was fortunate enough, I got to play a little bit of college ball, and everybody that I came in contact with as a coach impacted me. And this is the thing that I see as a coach and as a administrator or a teacher or even as a parent. You can impact people. You can impact them one or two ways, positive or negative. And,
absolutely,
I learned from the negative coaches just as well as I did the positive coaches. And, hey, I might want to do this, but I don't want to do that.
How do you feel like players? So you had a 25-year plus career as a coach. Any difference in players, how you had to approach from year 1 to year 25?
Oh, boy. Absolutely. I cut my teeth kind of old school. I grew up old school, work hard, do things right. And, you don't have to have a ton of ability to be successful. And then, I started at a wall with Coach Larry Foster. Mm-hmm. And, he's old school. And you just did it one way. And I did that for about 3 years. And so I learned that coaching style. And I was very, very fortunate. And then I moved to Hoax Bluff, where I worked with Coach Estes, Mike Estes, who was another success as a coach. And he had a little bit different, still old school, but he had a little bit different way that he coached. And so, I think you develop those I guess you pick up the traits from different coaches, and you just kind of you morph into what you want to become. And the first head coaching job I had was, as far as baseball, was at Westbrook, and man, I went in there like, you're gonna be this is my way, period. And then matter of fact, a couple of the ball players came back in 2018-19, and one of them stopped by and was watching us practice, and he came out there and he said, "Hey, coach, you don't coach like you used to." And I was like, "Well, you have to change. You have to be able to adapt."
Yeah, sure.
And so, but I think the biggest thing I learned over the course of my coaching career is you got to show every player that you care about them. And sometimes, back the old way you showed them you care was you chewed them out. Nowadays, or before I retired, you could put your arm around them and tell them, "Hey, man, I care about you, and maybe we need to try this instead of you're going to do this." And so my philosophy and the way I coached definitely changed.
One of the things that we want to touch on today especially is coaching players or dealing with students that come from father deficient homes. What are some of the challenges in that, and then what are some of the rewards?
Well, when I first started my career, the family nucleus was still there, a lot of it. It wasn't, I started in 92, so, you didn't have what you have nowadays. And so, I really didn't have to worry about a whole lot of it. The deal with the fathers then was dealing with them wanting to help you coach,
right.
And
too involved.
And that was okay, but they had a role just like I had a role. And then as it grew, and as times changed, you start seeing that the father's less and less and less involved. And especially with your athletes, and I know it's for everybody, but with the athletes that I was around, they all wanted a father support. And sometimes that support could be positive, and sometimes it's negative, and there's been times that I sat down with a dad sometimes say, "Hey, look, man, you got to back off."
Right.
Or I might say, "Hey, I need you to do this for me." So you gotta know how to talk to those fathers, and the ones that their dads, and I wasn't around a whole lot coaching wise that didn't have a father involved one way or the other. But I have, since I was changing careers and going into alternative education, you see that a lot more.
Sure.
And to me, the thing I've learned is everybody wants to know somebody cares about them. And if a student that we have doesn't have a father involved, you can tell there's usually some kind of deficiency. And, sometimes they need to have the tough love, which is, kind of chewing them out. And then there's other times you've got to put your arm around them and say, "Hey, man, everything's going to be okay."
Coaches wear a lot of hats.
Yes, they do.
Teachers wear a lot of hats.
Absolutely.
A lot more than just X's and O's, and you got to be relationship driven. And
that's right.
So, Coach, you've said a lot of good things, but what would you consider as the bedrock or the cornerstone of your program?
I'll say this, that over time that it changed. I think whenever I was younger, it was, hey, we're out here to win, period. And that's why they keep score. All right. So I get that we're gonna do things to try to win ball games, and we're gonna, that's the reason they have a scoreboard. And so, but as the Lord started changing the way I coached and the way I thought, and this happened about 2016, 2015, he just gave me kind of a different idea of how I needed to be approaching coaching. And that was, look, man, these guys, eventually sports is going to end for every single kid that you coach. Who are they going to be outside of sports? Who are they going to be when they're not a football player or a baseball player or a volleyball player or a soccer player? What kind of person are they going to be? And when that started happening, we started transitioning, and the Lord showed me a different way to coach. And it made me a better coach, and it made me a better dad. It made me a better husband, and it made me a better head coach for sure. Because then I started putting people around me that had a lot of the same philosophies that I did. I got rid of the ones that I didn't need to have around, and then I added some. And so I think a lot of that, I think as you start out young, you have one idea, and as you get older and more mature, you have a different idea of what things should look like.
So lessons that we learn in sports as coaches, we talk about this all the time, but we talk about how that helps you in life. How does that prepare you to be a father?
I think that with me, I tell you what helped me more than anything was coaching girls sports. That's the weirdest thing to say, probably, from a guy that coached mostly male sports, but coaching females taught me a lot more than coaching males. But girls will do exactly what you ask them to do 90% of the time. They're not going to ask questions. They're going to do it. And you're like, wow, this is different, because guys, for some reason, we're going to push against some of that. And so getting to coach girls early in my career, gave me an idea. Okay, sometimes you got to do something a little bit different. That bled over into, okay, I got two boys. Well, their personalities are different, man. Right. I can't teach, I can't raise, and I can't coach one like I did the other one.
Coach, this is going to be the you mentioned your dad earlier. Tell us about your dad.
So like I told you earlier, my parents got divorced when I was young, but he was an active dad. He was always there supporting every game, whatever I was involved in or my brother was involved in, he was there for that. But the biggest thing that he taught me was how to work hard and how to do it the right way. And what I mean by that is, we had a family farm once we moved to Gadsden. I was still living at home, and so we're building fences one day, and he's like, okay, we're building this fence. Me and my brother are out there, and I'm like, we got this tractor with this big auger on the back, and I'm like, why don't we use that? And he's like, well, no, you're going to use those post hole diggers so you can get it straight. And I'm like, what? Dad, we got this, and here I am, 18, 19 years old. I'm like, gosh, this doesn't make any sense. And then once you get the post in the ground, I'm like, let's put the dirt in. He's like, no, we got to put a little bit here and pack it down. Then we got to put a little bit more and pack it down. I'm like, what in the world, And what it taught me was, if you're going to do something, it's simple as putting a post in the ground, do it the right way. Take your time, take pride in it. And so if you can translate that over into your life, then sure, there's a lot of things that are going to happen that if you do it right, if you put that post in the ground right, then things end up going the right direction.
That's great. Any other dad stories?
Well, I've got one when I was in junior high. Coach Wooliver and Coach Long were my baseball coaches, and that was pretty interesting in itself. But I can remember my dad coming up from work, and I'd been struggling that day, and he just walked by the dugout, and we were playing at Cahaba Heights actually, and he said, "Why don't you try that other bat over there? It's got the big handle on it." I was like, "What's he talking about?" I'm like, "I'm gonna use this bat. It's my favorite bat. I'm gonna keep using it." Well, hard-headed as a 13, 14-year-old can be, so I went back up there with the same bat I've been using and had the same result. And so the next time up, I'm sitting there, and I look up in the stands, and he was like, just kind of pointed. He didn't say anything. It's the old school dads can just look at you sometimes, and you know what they mean.
They say an awful lot.
Oh, yeah. And so I was like, what have I got to lose? I'm 0 for whatever that game. And I'm like, so I grabbed that bat, and the first pitch they threw was about chest high, which I loved, and I hit it out of the park. And I was like, geez, why don't I listen to him like 2 at-bats ago? Great. So there's those things that you go back and forth, and you look back, and you're like, man, those are great memories. Yeah. Both my parents were very involved in my life, and I'm very thankful. Even coming from a divorced house, they were very involved. But my dad, like I said, he never missed anything. And the cool thing was, even as a player, he was coming, and when I was in high school, when I was in college, even if he didn't like the results he felt like maybe the coach wasn't doing the right thing or treating us right, he never, he just didn't talk about them. He just supported us, me and my brother both. And then, when my boys came through, he was at all the Little League games. And then when I started coaching, he would come watch us, play ball. And even after my boys graduated, he would sit outside, especially over at Westbrook. He had my dad had his spot, you know, and he didn't go down and talk to the parents. He had his spot because he wanted to watch the game and give me pointers afterwards, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And even when he got sick, you know, in 21, he came we played Mars Hill, which we were never able to beat and get to the finals. And he came to that ball game, and we split with him on I think Friday, and then we played him on Saturday, and he came to the game. It was actually the last ball game he got to come to, but we ended up beating him. And, man, just turning around looking and seeing that smile, it was just like you just couldn't beat it because he knew what I'd been going through,
yeah.
you know, because, you know, when you're trying to do something and you finally get that accomplished, you're like, wow. But it was cool. I still have a picture on my phone of just me and him standing out in front of the dugout after the game and smile on his face and my face and probably some tears, you know. But that was the last ball game he got to come to. So, you know, but it didn't matter that, you know, my boys weren't playing. He was there supporting me. The night we won the championship, I called and I said, "Hey, Dad," he said, and I couldn't even get it out of my mouth, and he started crying. He said, "I know, I heard it. I was listening to it on the radio." He said, "I'm sorry I couldn't be there." I was like, "It don't matter. You know, you were there." And so, you know, he's seen all the work that'd gone forth of, you know, me playing rec ball to playing junior high to playing just high school and college, the culminating of what happens at the end. Right. And so, but that was pretty cool that he got to see that too. And then I got to bring the state championship trophy home and get a picture with him of that with him. And so, that was pretty neat too. So, and I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to share one last story. So, the night before he passed away, he had been really, really sick. He had cancer. And so, the state has this thing called Make a Difference Coach, and I got to a Make a Difference Coach of the Year. The banquet was on a Friday night, and my dad, I'd been up the night before with him. He'd been just very up and down, sick, and just wasn't doing well. You know, you could kind of tell, and we kind of had an idea that it wasn't going to be long. And my stepmom came in, and I said, "Look, you know, I just don't feel like I need to go." And my dad he'd gone into the living room and sitting in a recliner, and he said, he kind of leaned up. He was very weak. He said, "You need to go." That's all he said. And so it was that night. That was that Friday night. And so I said, "All right." So we loaded up, went down, and I got home about 2:00 the next morning. And then about 8:00, the hospice nurse called and said, "Hey, y'all might want to come over and you know, visit with your dad." And he passed away that night about 10:30. So, you know, it's even in his sickness and in his last breath, he knew, hey, this is important to you. It's important to me. You know, go do what you're supposed to do. And he felt honored, I think.
Proud of his boy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
and
which was cool.
Oh, great. I'm going to add something because you've mentioned it a few times, and it's something that I don't ever want to neglect either, but coaches' wives are a special breed.
Boy, they are.
And what would you want to share with Nanette if you could talk to her right now?
You know, and I got to share this whenever I got that coaching award. I told her, I said, "You know, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you because, you know, like I said, she's putting the kids to bed some nights when I get home. And, you know, you experience this too.
Sure.
She had supper on the table. And she also lended advice on coaching decisions sometimes, which, you know, is okay. But what's cool about that is, you know, sports is kind of something that it brought me to Gadsden. It brought me to my wife because we met in college because she was playing softball, I was playing baseball. And so it's a unique thing that people sometimes look at sports as a living. I look at sports as it changed my life because I was able to meet my wife, have my boys, sure. And then I had the other experiences of the sports. And so, you know, every successful coach I've ever seen has had a support group, and that means wife absolutely first, and then their children supporting them. And I've never seen a successful coach that didn't have that support group. Now there may be out there, but I haven't seen them.
Well, Coach, we've got some of your former players. We've he had some things to say to you, and we want to play those for you now, kind of as our gift for thanking you for participating in our podcast today. So
absolutely.
So thank you.
It's really cool.
What stood out to me more than anything about your coaching was that you wanted to make great baseball players and you wanted to win. You hated losing, but more than that, you wanted to make great men who would grow up and be successful, and you also wanted to share the word of Christ.
Your mission was always to pour into us and to pour in to our development as godly young men.
Outside of my mom and dad, I really can't think of anybody else that had the kind of impact that you did on my life. And
the first thing that I think will mean more to you than anything is that whenever I am feeling down or whenever I am questioning whether I'm doing the right thing or really anything like that, I open up the Bible you gave us on senior night and I read that note.
Man, he just, poured so much into me, taught me the ropes, taught me, how to coach, but not only that, teaching me how to coach a game, he taught me, the impact we have as coaches.
My favorite memory is when we won the state championship down in Montgomery and brought the blue mat back to Westbrook. Thank you, Coach.
Hey, Coach K, I just wanted to say thank you for always supporting and encouraging me, even after my 4 years with you at Westbrook.
But if you look back over your 33 years that you've been involved with us, look back, it's pretty impressive what you've done. And there's a bunch of successful men out there in the world because of what you've done.
you are definitely the most influential factor in how I've coached.
Hey, Dad. I just want to start out by saying thank you for spending so many years coaching and using that to have an impact on young men's lives, including myself.
But you didn't only make sure that we were going to be the best baseball players. You wanted us to grow into strong, Christ-like men. I thank you for leading us in that direction.
Coach, just your thoughts on that's powerful.
Yeah, it is.
It's powerful, and I think it speaks not only to your character, to your long-lasting effects, and you know the power that is out there, the opportunities that coaches have to leave that type of legacy, to leave a lot of yourself and invest it in everybody you come in contact with. Well done.
Thank you, Coach. I really appreciate that. You know, and it's just I'll just say this: it's been a blessing, and I think the Lord, you know, if you follow what He's supposed to do, He will continue to bless that. And you know, it didn't start out that way, but the Lord taught me a lot of lessons along the way. So,
thank you very much. Great honor to have you on the show tonight, Coach, and just look forward to seeing what God does the next chapter in your life.
Well, thank you.
Those around you.
I appreciate it. Appreciate being here and having an opportunity to share, you know, some of my story.
Thanks a lot, Coach.